Hi people, today I'll be sharing on the things I had to get used to in SMU law. And these are things that I felt were different from JC. It's like to me a big jump or something new, something fresh that I didn't really see coming. And I hope that my sharing will benefit you in terms of your decision making or just to manage your expectations of law school. First thing, audio learning is something that I really had to get used to. I mean, I wasn't even a whatever learner. I wasn't a visual learner, audio learner. I just didn't pay attention in class in JC. And especially during lectures, I would not even be listening. I would just be simply daydreaming or just being in my own world. And this was something that I really, really had to get used to because in SMU, there are no lectures. There is no chance for you to daydream. If you daydream, you learn nothing and you may or may not get any notes because SMU functions in a seminar style. So, as a prof, they are not exactly obliged to give you a lecture or give you a set of slides or give you some sort of notes. Yes, some profs do prepare certain teaching materials to help you in your revision, but that is not a guarantee. In fact, there will be profs who will try to take the easy way out and just conduct a discussion instead of a lecture because it is easier for them, right, to hold a discussion than to teach you the law as how a normal lecturer would, right? So you really have to get used to audio learning. You really have to pay full attention for the 3 hours that you are in class. In fact, even listening in class was something that I had to get used to. Also, the fact that it's interactive. You know, in JC, your lectures are sit back and relax style. You can do whatever you want. You cannot be focused. You don't really. There's almost zero chance of you being called to answer a question. But in SMU, some professors do like to pick students to answer questions, even if you don't know the answer. Yeah, so this interaction it can be quite stressful at times, especially if your prof is the kind who likes to call on people to answer questions. I don't really like that kind of prof. Yeah, you will never know what kind of prof you get, so that's one thing that I had to get used to as well. I had a particular prof who would certainly pick someone or few people at every lesson, and the more you try to avert your eyes from the prof, the more she would pick on you. It was not really conducive for my learning. Another thing I had to get used to was also intellectual debates. This is something that never really happened in school in the past. Like at least for JC, nobody really debated about anything. We'll just sit there and attempt to absorb whatever the teacher teaches. But in SMU, you are expected to participate in some form of discussion when the profs call for the discussion or when there's a controversial point. I mean, you don't have to participate if you're really too shy. You just have to suffer in terms of class part grades. Yes, and you are also expected to sometimes sieve out important and main learning points from the discussion. Essentially, you have to pay attention to what everyone says and listen out for the conclusion as well as, and also the prof's comments on certain people's opinions, as that will shed light on what your prof's opinion is. Sometimes profs don't try to be tricky and try to be cheeky also. They don't want to give you their true opinion, but you can suss it out based on their comments on what other people say. And now the question comes, what if you are a quiet person? What if you're an introvert, right? I think I'm not an introvert, but I also didn't fancy talking in class. I think I mentioned before that that was not my learning style. So there were times I kept quiet, and it's just a matter of being strategic. I think in my previous video I did mention that you can try to select classes with a lower class participation rate so that you don't have to stress out every week trying to participate. You can still survive, you can still do well as a quieter student or someone who doesn't really like to speak. Just have to make sure that your other components are going well. There are some profs that are kind enough to recognize that not everyone likes to speak up in class, so they will create alternative methods for you to so-called participate. Some allow you to write essays or do certain other things to help you in your participation. And I think in the first few years, there are some profs who do try to allocate participation. For instance, they may require you to present a case in this certain week or pair you up with somebody to present certain things in a certain week so that your participation is not so unexpected and that you can prepare for the participation. Second thing I had to get used to was continuous assessment. Oh, this is really continuous. Assessment is truly continuous because you have class part being assessed every single week, which means that you have to always know what's going on. If for this week you didn't do your readings, how are you going to participate in class? You're not going to say anything intelligent. You're not even going to dare to raise your hand to say anything because you just don't know what's going on, right? And you can only pray and hope that your prof does not call on you that week. On top of that, I mentioned earlier in my video that you have to do project work, research paper, and there'll be midterms. So all these are forms of assessment that you have to keep up with. It's like having an exam all the time. I think essentially you don't really get to rest during the sem because you will always have something to do. If it's not your project, it'll be your research paper. If it's not those, then you'll have to study for midterms. Or just doing your readings for the week so that you can participate in class. So there will always be something that you have to do. Class part, project work. Okay, I think I mentioned a little bit about class part. I don't think everyone will actually get used to speaking up. After like 5 years of SMU, I still am not the sort who will want to speak up voluntarily. You do get better with time. You do get more confident with time. And you do start to realize that, it's okay to say something wrong and it's okay to not always be right. One of the fears of class participation is the fear of being judged by your classmates, right? But over time, you do realize that everyone makes mistakes. Everyone does say something off at times. You just have to build the confidence to be able to speak up when you really have something to say, which was something that I really had to learn to adapt to. Project work presentation. This is something that you definitely have to get used to in SMU. Almost every mod comes with a project. So it's like PW for A levels, but repeated 5 times in a single semester. And you have like 4 years, which is 8 semesters. So you have about average of like 40 presentations to do throughout your whole 4 years in SMU. And you will start to realize that PW in JC was nothing as compared to these endless presentations that you have to do in SMU. And I think over time you do get used to presenting. You do get used to learning how to speak using your slides. There are strategies and methods to make your slides intuitive such that you can speak just based off the slides. And you also learn to create PowerPoint presentations really quickly and more effectively. In this point on working with people who won't work with you, you will be so surprised that even in law school there will be people who are not motivated to do well. I don't know what are they doing in law school or why they even sign up for law school. But yes, there will always be people who are okay with letting you bear their burdens. You have to work with people who just refuse to work. Just like doing PW, only this is times 40 of it. Next thing, subjectivity. Yeah, this is really ironic. It's like injustice in law school, right? It's that, class part is really subjective. I think the profs, they're humans, so they can't be objective. And profs have also limited memory. Sometimes they don't even remember that you spoke up, perhaps in the earlier part of the sem. Yeah, some profs also like some students more than others. Some profs like students who are talkative. And some profs just hate you for your face. I also don't know. I had this prof who really, really hated me. In SMU, how do profs know how to call you? They don't remember your names. They just expect you to put up this name tent in front of you so that your name is always accessible to them, right? There was this prof. Her teaching style was such that every week she would call at random anyone in the class to answer her list of questions. And I find this a very unfair way to assess a student's preparedness for the class because the readings are massive. You may have done your readings, but you may not remember what you've read. Especially if let's say, so I'm just giving you an example. The readings are more than 50 pages, but let's say if your readings are 50 pages. By the time you reach page 50, you may not remember exactly what was written on page 1, right? And this prof would specifically ask you a question on this particular page or on page 26, for instance. Okay, she won't say 26, but she'll ask you such a specific fact that you may not be able to answer it on the spot. You may need some time to refer to your notes and all that. That each time she picked on me, the question would be a factual and specific question. For example, which section says blah blah blah? Okay. And there are so many sections that we have to go through in a single week of reading. And when you get that kind of question, you're just stuck because it's like a factual question and it's a specific question. It's not an opinion question where you can just express your opinion. And some of my friends do get opinion questions. So even if they're not very sure of the specifics, they can roughly give an opinion based on their broad understanding of what they read. Yeah, so I always couldn't answer questions because I was just not. My intention when I read was never to memorize anything. And I would always have to take some time to refer to my notes before I can try to answer her question. And I think for that, she really hated me. She gave me a C+ for class part, even though there were times when I tried to volunteer my answers for other questions. Class part has this element of subjectivity that I had to get used to. It's really unlike A-levels where, what you write is what you write. There's no arguing about, was that your answer or was that not your answer? Did you say this or did you not say this? You are really not 100% in control of your grades. Like in A-levels, you are fully 100% in control, right? You write your answer, you determine what answer you want to put. But in SMU, if you for instance, group project, it's a group performance. Your teammates' performance may actually even affect your grade. And there are so many elements to it that it almost feels like you're really not 100% in control of your own grades. Except for your final exams. But your final exams will only be a percentage. It's like maybe 40%, or sometimes even less. Be prepared that, sometimes people's weakness may be factored into your own grades. But of course, on the converse is that people's strengths may also be factored into your grades. So if you have a group mate who is particularly sharp, particularly good at making presentations, this group mate may actually help you score a higher grade for your group project and pull your grades up. So it is a double-edged sword, I would say. The competition in law school is there, but it's subtle. So in JC, you have a range of people. Some people are super slackers, some people are super hardcore. But in law school, I think most people belong to the average to hardcore category. I mean, that's how they end up in law school in the first place, right? And that's how they end up scoring all their straight A's and 1 million distinctions in the first place. In that sense, they will spoil the market, and somebody will always work harder than you, even though you're already working hard. Somebody will spend their whole holidays doing all the readings for the next semester. There will be this person, and somebody will have read every single word of their readings from first word to the last word, even though I feel that is not humanly possible. But somebody will be able to achieve that. Law students are super good at making life hard for themselves by bringing the standards up. In law school, I think the competition is still there. It's not to say that you can't make friends or that you won't have friends or that people are not willing to help. People are still willing to help. But at the end of the day, everyone knows that everyone is competition. It's like a silent understanding that you do not ask your friends for their exam notes. Because your exam notes are literally the answers that you are going to write down, you're going to put down into your exam paper. At least that was how I prepared my notes. Because they would have spent a lot of effort and a lot of time preparing that. And commonsensically, they would not want to share it with you, right? And if you ask them and they say no, you just make the friendship awkward. So yes, there's always this invisible barrier of competition, though you can still definitely make friends. It's the kind of friendship with a glass barrier in between. Next, you also get professors who are only professors. They are, inverted commas, unfriendly. Not to say that they are rude or disrespectful. Most of them are respectful, most of them are polite, most of them are pleasant to be around. But because I do a different degree and I have professors from the other school, in comparison to them, law school professors are more to the point. They cut to the chase, and they just don't have time for bullshit. They don't have time to ask you oh, how was your holiday? How was your break? How was your recess break? It's all this just gets thrown out of the class because they just don't have time, right? In 3 hours, they've covered a lot of things, and they just rather jump straight to the topics. The classes tend to be more task-oriented. For most of the professors, I see them just as professors, not really as friends, not really as people that I can chat with about other areas of life. And this is really unlike my JC because I felt that some of my JC teachers were really more like friends. We don't just talk about work, we can just talk about their families, their kids, and all those. Next thing, autonomy to plan your schedule. Oh, this is a big headache for me because I'm someone who really hates making decisions. I'm super indecisive. I don't know why, but I find it very hard to make a decision. I weigh a lot of pros and cons, and in the end, I just can't come to a conclusion. Because for every pro, there will be a con. For every con, there will be a pro, and it just kills me to make a decision. And there's so many decisions to make now that you have so much autonomy, right? Like example, even when you're choosing a class, you need to consider which profs to go for. Do you want a prof who is more strict and fair, or you want an adjunct prof, or a full-time prof? There's so many things to consider in terms of just prof. Which mod to take? Okay, the first few years, the mods are standard, but once you go on to electives, then there will be a difference because, and this is also even linked to prof, which mods to take. If you take certain electives, then the profs will have to be adjunct profs, and adjunct profs have their pros and cons. Some of them are just very lax, some of them just not focus on teaching because they're adjunct, right? So they actually do a full-time job outside of teaching, and teaching is just like their side thing. Yeah, there are a lot of pros and cons, which is super. I don't know how to balance them out and how many mods to take. Why is this important? Because it actually affects it may affect your grades. If you're so overloaded for one semester, the amount of time you have to study for each mod will be reduced, and then you may struggle to do well for the mod, so it affects. And then there's also the consideration of whether you should bid in a group or bid for a mod without a group. Because why? There's a project work component, right? So some people do actually find their groups even before the start of the module so that they can bid for the module together as a group. For people like me, I would consider the class part, the percentage involved for class participation and like the other components, the percentage really makes a difference as well. And some people even do consider bell curve, but this is something that I don't care about. So what do I mean by bell curve? I had a friend who would bid for a class and look at the class list. And if he sees that the class list has too many dean's listers or too many so-called pro students who will definitely steal the A's away, he would switch classes and go to a class with fewer dean's listers, for instance, so that the bell curve will be in his favor. Which is very strategic, but I just had no capacity to think about such things. Next thing is being on your own. Well, yeah, uni feels like you're just on your own. Nobody tells you what you need to do anymore. You know, in JC, you have a timetable. Your schedule is planned out every week. And they tell you that you have to have a CCA. They tell you have to go for this class, you go for that class, etc. But in uni, it's like nobody's going to tell you what you need to do. You just have to do what you want to do, which is kind of scary because if you have been living under this system of doing just what you need to do, you may not actually know what you want to do. In uni, you really have to make choices based on what you want to do because nobody is going to force you to do anything. Even your choice of electives, yes, there will be some standard requirements that you have to fulfill, but you have a lot more choice. Even CCA, you can have a CCA or cannot have a CCA. Hobbies, you can pursue a hobby or not pursue a hobby. It's like now it's no longer enforced. Nobody will give you a grade or a score for being good at your CCA. So now there's a lot of things that you have to choose on your own will with no obligations whatsoever and no consequences in terms of grades. I felt that I had to learn how to manage deadlines. That, you know, last time in JC, everyone has the same deadlines. Everyone has to submit certain pieces of work by a certain time. In law school, everyone has different deadlines depending on which project group work you are from, which prof you are learning under. Your deadlines are no longer the same, so you really have to manage your own time such that you can meet your own deadlines. In uni, comparison increasingly becomes pointless. Some of your friends you realize are not even taking the same course as you anymore. Like everyone is going to do what they need to do and what they want to do. Maybe you decided to go to law school and your friend decided to go to med school. How do you compare law school and med school? It's just different. So that's across schools, and even if you're in the same law school, I have friends who come into the same law school as me. But we all have different paths. Like I want to do a double degree. I want to pursue a separate major. And some of my friends will be like, no, I'm just happy with my law school degree. I don't want to major in anything. And I'm just coming to law school to and get a law degree. And some of my friends will be like, okay, I want to go to law school, but I don't have to get straight A's in law school. I don't have to get summa, cum laude. I'm just going to aim for 3.4 out of 4. But I'm going to have a CCA and I want to pursue this new hobby. So, you know, everyone is so varied. You just have to do your own things at your own time and decide for yourself what you really want. Which was something that felt quite strange to me. I did feel a bit lost at times, and I just realized that you really have to be independent in some sense and know what you really want instead of always looking over your shoulder to see what other people are doing.